Screenagers, welcome back to another episode of the Canon, your favorite movie podcast, the only movie podcast providing you with a watch list of the most essential movies ever made. I don't know if you guys missed us last week, but we took a week off and we're back this week. We'll be back next week as well with our last two episodes of season 3. We're ending things on a pretty high note, I would say. We've got a great movie today. Very excited to talk about it. Very excited for the guests that we have on to talk about it. We've got Sailor. We've got Jacob. How are you guys doing? Welcome back to the show. What's up?
I'm doing fantastic, Raph. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, thanks again. Always a pleasure to be on.
I think this is our first time doing this particular grouping of Screenage Wasteland contributors, so this will be exciting. I feel like between the three of us, we'll be able to, bounce conversation off of each other. I'm excited for you two to chat in this forum for the first time. So all exciting stuff. That's one of the cool things about the show is that we have so many contributors on the website that, even this is our 47th episode, we're still getting new combinations of people. And that's fun. That's really exciting stuff.
It's kind of amazing. It's probably because there's so many episodes in season 2. I was like, yeah, I don't know these movies that well, so I couldn't be on.
Yeah, everyone has their own different sort of like movies that interest them and movies that are their personal favorites. And sometimes it doesn't always align. Like Sailor and Bob, I feel like you guys are pretty aligned in most of the movies that you guys like. And then Jacob, I feel like you and Ramona and Duke end up signing on for like a lot of overlapping episodes.
That's kind of how it's been.
But it's great. I'm happy that we have this combo here. What kind of snacks do you guys have for movies? What's your like approach for snacks when you actually go to the theater?
I feel like you're literally trying to set me up for a ramble on soundbite with this.
No, not at all.
I prefer grapes of all things. I like a cold grape.
Okay, is that at home or when you go to the theater? Because most theaters that I go to don't have an option for cold grapes.
You think I'm not sneaking in some cold grapes? You don't know about Sailor. Why do you think I got that giant dune bucket filled to the brim with grapes?
So many questions. I don't even have time to begin to ask what any of them. Okay, so you're bringing your Dune 2 bucket full of frozen grapes.
Delicious.
Green grapes?
Yes. Here's the thing about grapes. They're delicious, first of all. Second, I hate the sound of crinkle wrappers in the theater. So I don't want candy. So that eliminates that. Grapes are already Mother Nature's candy. 2, I don't like snacks that get my hands all greasy and filthy. So no Doritos, none of that. And popcorn is kind of in that. Yeah, that's
no
kind of
popcorn.
in the same ballpark. Grapes, there's no residue on your fingers, and you just pop them in your mouth. It's a cold snap. That's all I'm going to say. It's delicious.
You know what? That's interesting. It doesn't have a bad chewing sound like some snacks
exactly.
do.
I mean, unless you eat like a fucking horse, you shouldn't be hearing the grape sound.
Okay, Jacob, what about you?
Yeah.
Are you a big grape guy? Are you sneaking frozen grapes into the theater?
No grapes. Little packets of raisins. No. I'm a very classic guy. I have AMC A-list, and so I had the popcorn bucket too. Because I have popcorn in my house that I eat occasionally, but I don't really love eating popcorn at home. It's more of a you go to the theater, you get popcorn. That's just kind of the combo. So, I've got it set up to where the popcorn, basically starts to pay for itself.
Yeah.
The A-list and go into all these movies now that we're trying to review and stuff. So it's pretty nice. Yeah, it's always a go-to popcorn and a.
How buttery do you get your popcorn?
Well, it's kind of it's like you can't really now since COVID. You can kind of try and put some butter on the top and then kind of shake it in a little bit. The problem is you're just getting a bunch of butter on top. Back before COVID, they would like kind of do half the bucket and put a little butter in there and then finish up. And
then do the rest.
Yeah, that would make it, more evenly distributed. It's not really, you don't like want to put a ton of butter. It's more like getting it on all the popcorn that's the problem. So I don't go crazy.
Does AMC, that's not one of the theaters where they have like the butter machines on the outside. All the buttering is done by the employees, right?
No, AMC does have now it's set up where you have to put your own butter.
Okay, so I'll let you in on a little life hack that my buddy taught me.
Is this the straw?
The straw. Does the straw not work for you? I feel like the straw is a good trick.
I've tried the straw once or twice. I haven't fooled with it too much, but yeah, I have. I've heard that, and I've tried. I think it worked okay when I did it. I don't know if I fully did it the right way or not, but
yeah,
it worked. It worked all right.
I'm a big fan of the straw. I like my popcorn buttery. I'm not just asking this question out of the blue. I was just sort of thinking about it because I've been going to not a lot of movies lately, but I've been going to more movies the past couple of weeks, and I feel like each time I've had different snacks. Do you guys ever go to Alamo Drafthouse? Do you have Alamo Drafthouse by where y'all live?
I'm lucky to have an AMC.
We have one in Arizona. It's not close to me at all. My friend goes to it all the time.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to go to if it's not, well, I guess anything is hard to go to if it's not close. And it's not like totally worth it to go like, an hour plus out of your way to get a hamburger with your movie.
Yeah, the last two towns I lived in. So the last town I lived in had a locally owned cinema with 3 screens.
Nice.
And so they were oftentimes playing only the biggest or like the most family or sometimes religious oriented movie. And the place before that also had a locally owned cinema, and they closed, and it's now a church. So
the cinema is my church, so I get it.
I was really mad when they shut down. I was hoping maybe some off chance it sits there for a while and another theater kind of picks it up. No such luck. It's a church now, which means it's going to be a church forever.
That's how it usually goes.
Living in New York, I feel like it's very easy for me to forget that it's hard for people to see movies when you can't I can literally walk around the corner within a 15-minute walk from my apartment. There are 4 different movie theaters that I can go to. That's pretty insane.
For instance, you could probably go see I saw the TV Glow is probably showing, I'm sure, in New York.
I saw the TV Glow literally within one of those 4 theaters that I just mentioned, maybe at 2 of them.
I don't think it's in my state.
Yeah. So there's a huge Regal that's near me that I can go to. There's a theater that plays more indie movies, even more indie than A24 movies. There's one that's kind of in between the bigger blockbuster movies and the indie movies, and then there's one that plays really obscure and old movies. Last night my buddy and I just went to see Deep Cover from 1992 with Lawrence Fishburne, because it was just it was playing at this theater. And again, I feel like oftentimes I become very ignorant to the fact that not everyone has that available to them. So when you go online and you see people complain about the theater going experience is dying and people just need to go to movies more, it's no, it's really hard for a lot of people to get to the theaters. Most of the people saying that are probably from LA or New York or maybe Chicago, where they have tons of theater going opportunities that just aren't available to everyone else.
I concur.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I'm near our capital city of Montgomery in Alabama, and they do have an art house theater with just one screen, and so they just show they'll show some art house stuff. It's really been a godsend, at least for some of the best picture nominees and stuff, or or I mean, this past year was kind of most of those Best Picture nominees were pretty available, but yeah, like Oscars type stuff, they're clutch, but it's still just one screen, so it's like one little week at a time.
Like only a few screenings a day.
Yeah, like 2 a day, and it's like usually like Thursday. And they do like special screenings throughout the week, so they do some like old classics and things. They have like a film class. It's a cool place, but it's limited.
Interesting. Yeah, man. I mean, even something like that is like kind of it's not that it's hard to come across, but like you're not going to get that everywhere unless you're near a sort of major metropolitan area. Okay, and I'm going to tie all this back to Akira because the theater where I saw Deep Cover yesterday, as of this recording, a few years back when it must have been for, what was it, the 35th anniversary, when the new like 4K restoration of Akira and Akira, I'm probably going to do the really American pronunciation of it the entire episode, but when that re-release came out, a bunch of my buddies went to see it, and I was so completely devastated that I had to miss it. I was unfortunately tied up with work. But again, for a movie like this, that, even this is like one of the most popular movies. We're going to talk about why it's one of the most essential movies ever made. But I'm sure during that re-release, Jacob, like the theater near you maybe was playing it for like a week. Sailor, like there were probably theaters by you, but like there were still probably a bunch of people who wouldn't have even like known that they had the opportunity to see something like this on the big screen, which is kind of, it's kind of fucked. We should all be able to experience this in like on the biggest screen possible and in its full glory.
Well, I think there was just an article that was released that said theaters, people still want to go to the theaters, so play older movies. Because every time they play older movies, like a Ghostbusters or a Scream or something that's usually a bigger named older movie, they do very well. So I don't know why studios that don't have something coming out in April or May or whatever don't just say, hey, because Disney used to do that all the time. Back before they decided to remake all of their movies, they would be like, here's 4 Herbie movies. Here's Snow White again. Here's Jungle Book. You know what I mean? So I don't know why we have to wait till anniversaries to get Akira. Or, you know what I mean? Like, Akira should... I mean, my AMC, I can't speak to Jacob's, but my AMC does, I think it's every Wednesday, they do usually show an older movie. That's why I was able to see The Thing on the big screen finally, and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and certain movies like that. So I'm at least lucky in that regard. But I don't know why they don't decide to just dip into their back catalog and be like, here's some more older movies. Because I would. If I'm bored and I have nothing going on a Wednesday, fuck it, I'll go see Karate Kid. Why the hell not? And I definitely would have saw Akira, but yeah, I can't say it wasn't playing because Arizona is very good on because I just checked it to see if some of my theaters are playing. I saw the TV Glow. They're not near me, but if I had a car, yeah, I would fucking drive an hour to go see it. But because I don't drive, that's a problem with my movie going experience. Is the closest theater is...
You should live in New York.
Yeah, that I really should, but yeah, if I knew that they were playing Akira for the 35th anniversary, I would have made a trip. I would have figured it out.
Yeah, because this is one of your favorite movies, right?
Yeah, it's in my top 5 of all time. It might be my second favorite of all time.
Amazing. So, all right, you're going to have a lot to say about this. And Jacob, this is a movie that you hadn't seen until very recently, right?
That's right.
So we've got the two total different ends of the spectrum in terms of where we're coming to this movie from. I'm probably somewhere in between. But it will be really interesting to see how, Sailor, having lived with this movie for, however many years it's been, and being a movie that he thinks about constantly, I'm sure. And Jacob being someone who just came to it, within a week. Okay, let's get into the movie a little bit. And Jacob, I want to get your thoughts first, since your first viewing was so recent. What were your sort of initial thoughts? What was your initial reaction to this movie? And then also just give us which version you watched. So there aren't different versions in terms of like different cuts, but there's obviously the dub version and the sub version. So let us know which one of those you watched, and then what your just general sort of thoughts, first impressions were of this movie.
Yeah, so as I kind of mentioned this before we started recording, but we I watched the dubbed version. It's really the premium way to watch the movie. I think is the English dub, and then watch the first half, and then wait a couple days and watch the second half. It just absolutely great. Now, obviously, this is a movie I'm gonna have to rewatch to really get, because there's a lot going on. One of the first impressions from this movie is it's kind of dense, plot
Mhm.
wise, things like that going on. But I also really struggled when I was choosing. I was like, okay, are we gonna watch? Am I gonna watch the subtitle or the dub? Because they're both available, and I don't mind subtitles. I like usually prefer subtitles, but with all the animation that was going to be on the screen, I didn't want to necessarily distract my eye, so I chose to go with the English dub. And I've heard the English dub is pretty good, and it seemed okay, but I know that English dub can take away the emotion of the lines a little bit. But anyway,
Mhm.
my very first thing taken away from this movie is, I mean, the animation is just beautiful. It's amazing, intricate. That's kind of the main reason I wanted to watch it, and just kind of agreed to do this podcast without really knowing how I felt about it. I'm not a huge anime guy, so this didn't
Mm.
necessarily break that boundary for me where I just was like, "Oh yeah,
Mhm.
okay, this is anime too," but I really love it. It's still kind of distant for me. Like even Miyazaki stuff, I honestly, like, I love the animation, but it's hard for me to get into story wise. So nothing really different here, but like I said, and I really appreciate the grit and like the kind of maturity, the mature themes,
Mhm.
things that are shown depicted in the movie. Is kind of I don't know exactly about the history of how that was, and what this movie come out in 98,
88.
88.
88. Okay, thank you. Um, so yeah, I mean, in terms of, it's something I wish that the West would take away from this movie, is the market for that kind of story in an animated medium, because that part of it is amazing. And so that's kind of my takeaway. It's certainly not like my number two film of all time or anything, but
Mhm.
love the animation. I love what it could do for animated storytelling moving forward, and probably, I'm sure y'all could discuss, if y'all have looked at more of that, the impact it did have on storytelling overall, animation otherwise.
I mean, I think that's a great point in terms of like what we can. That discussion comes up like probably once a year of animated movies aren't just kids movies. Like it's a really rich, expressive medium where you can do a lot of cool things within the art form. And it seems like Japan has always had a much richer history of engaging with the medium in a lot of cool different ways that we just haven't been able to really fully tap into in the States or like Western cinema more generally. Yeah, that's an awesome point. The animation is absolutely amazing, and I'm sure we'll continue to talk about it throughout the course of the episode. But Sailor, now we come to you, our resident Akira super fan here at Screen Age Wasteland. So what we're gonna do is I want you to tell us your thoughts about this movie, the first time you watched it, what this movie means to you, why it's probably your number 2 movie of all time, all of that good stuff. So, Sailor.
Well, yeah, you're definitely going to need that because I really wanted to actually Jacob so hard. Not to correct him, but I don't think either one of you know this. Like My Neighbor Totoro, Akira has 2 different English dubs. So the one you guys have probably listened to is the 2001 dub, but there was a 1989 dub that was on the VHS. It's commonly referred to as the Streamline dub, and that had different voice actors and everything. And that's why, depending on which version you heard, is how you are going to pronounce Kaneda's name. Because one dub has Kaneda, and then the other one has Kaneda. So depending on which dub is how you pronounce that dude's name. Because neither dub can get it right. And they have Kaneda! But the other, Kaneda! So radically different pronunciations, and no one can agree on how the hell to pronounce that kid's name. But
it doesn't matter. He's only like the main character of the entire movie.
This is the perfect drinking game if you want to kill yourself. Just take a shot every time they say Tetsuo, Kaneda, or Akira. You're gonna die. You're not gonna make it. They say it a lot. The first episode I was ever on the Canon was Blade Runner, and obviously I had my issues with that movie, but I have never really shat on that movie because I understand what that movie does to people, which is it just expands your mind into this world that you didn't know was possible beforehand. Because that was the introduction to many people on Cyberpunk. My introduction to Cyberpunk and to anime was Akira. Akira, it's so hard talking about this movie. It's like when you see that girl that you're interested in high school, and you're like, oh, if I could just talk to her, maybe I could convince her to go to prom with me. And then you finally have your chance, and you just throw up on yourself because you don't know what the hell to say, and you make a fool out of yourself because there's so many things you want to say, and you just look like a weirdo or a creep because you don't know what to say. That's how I kind of feel about this movie because there's so many emotions I have attached to this. There's so much nostalgia. So I guess I'll just start.
Just let it all out,
I'll start
brother.
with the nostalgia, and then I'll talk about how important this movie is. Because even if this movie wasn't important to the fabric of cinema and really pop culture as a whole, it's important to me because it changed my life. Because, like I said, like Blade Runner, it showed me a world that I didn't know was possible. I was like, what the hell am I seeing? I didn't even understand the images that I was seeing on the screen. Like, there's these little kids that are old people. Are they ghosts? I didn't know. There's big old teddy bears with melting faces. There's a cool bike chase. A guy turns into a giant mechanical fetus at the end. There's so much shit going on in this movie that I didn't understand any of it as a child. And to be honest with you, even after reading the manga and watching this movie about 150 times, I still really couldn't tell you all that happens in this movie. But as a kid, sitting there in front of my little 32-inch TV, which was big at the time, watching this movie, my God, from the music to the visuals, and you have to remember, if people, because now anime and manga and all of that shit is so ubiquitous within pop culture now. It's cool to like anime. Back in 1988, it was unheard of. We didn't know that there was a world of animation outside of Disney. I don't think people realize how much of a stranglehold Disney had on animation for like 60 years. From 1923, 26, when Snow White came out, till 1988, it was all Disney. There was no other animation studio operating on that high of a level like Disney. And it wouldn't be until the 80s when Don Bluth staged the walkout, and he made his own studio with Secret of Nim, and then animation could be more than just Disney. But this was the move. This was the turning point where people were like, "Oh, there's animated movies that don't involve a singing princess and talking animals and shit. Like, who the hell? Like, it's insane." And then on top of that, you have all of the themes this movie's covering, all of the, so let's take it back to when I was a kid seeing this movie. I think I want to say it got me into reading manga, which I can't say that I'm a super fan of anime or manga like other people are. I usually, if I'll stick to anime that's more than just that's no more than 3 seasons, because any more than that, I'm like, I can't. I can't watch a One Piece that has 1,000 episodes and counting. Like, I just can't. But like a Death Note that has like 3 seasons, I'm in. That's great. That's all I need, baby. A Cowboy Bebop, 2 seasons or whatever, good. But Akira got me into that. It got me into manga. It taught me how to read the weird way Japanese people write their damn comic books, which is from the back in a weird backward Z formation. It's very weird. But you acclimate yourself to it because I want to understand your culture. I want to get more of Akira. It was like a drug, and I was fiending. I was on the street just like scratching my chest, like, come on, baby. I suck your dick for some more Akira, baby. Where's it at? Where's the
Oh, dear.
And then they got me into Ghost in the Shell.
God.
And thankfully, Ghost in the Shell had a bunch of sequels, but this never did. This was a standalone movie. And if you've ever read the manga, you realize that this is half of a story. This is to properly illustrate how truncated this story is from the original source material. It would be like if Game of Thrones was 3 seasons instead of 6. I mean, you're still getting the bulk of the story, but you're missing out on so much character and nuance and these little pieces here and there. So, I mean, if you've ever watched Game of Thrones, you realize, and even the show is a truncated version of the books. So to cut it even more into thirds, that's basically what this movie is. That's why it kind of doesn't make sense. It's convoluted as shit. It's really rushed in the third act. And these aren't flaws in any way. These aren't nitpicks. I'm just saying, from somebody who hasn't read the manga, this must be like, what the hell am I even... I can't even imagine what the hell you're getting out of this, but it's the same effect I had when I was a child watching it, which is, I don't care that I don't understand what I'm seeing or the story. I'm just enthralled by the images and the sound and the music and the animation, which is so fluid. Because again, this was also another animated movie that was animating on ones. And you don't realize how important that is until you go back and watch anime from the 60s and you see Speed Racer, and that's animated on 3s or 4s. And you're like, what the fuck is this? All of those jokes on Family Guy are correct. This is basically stills. This is not animation. But that's how cheap animation was in Japanese anime back in the day. But Akira was like, no. Like, you can count the granules of sand in some scenes. Like, it's insane.
Do you want to, for those who don't know, including myself, when you say ones, animated on 1s versus animated on 3s and 4s, what exactly are you referring to? I'm glad you
said it, because I do forget sometimes. People don't understand the... animating on 1s means every single frame of animation is a new drawing. Now, that is very time consuming. That is very cost effective. So when you say animating on 4s, that's every 4 frames is a new drawing. That's why a movie like Yellow Submarine is very stilted in its animation. And you're like, why the fuck does it look like this? Why does it look so weird? It's because it's animated on fours instead of every new frame is a new drawing.
That's kind of also like the school of thought behind a lot of anime TV shows from even from like the 80s on, like
Mm-hmm.
Dragon Ball, things like that, even up to like Pokemon. Are, I don't know if they're necessarily on threes and fours, but a lot of like that animation style where it's just like a blank background and then a character's face super close up is because it's so much more cost efficient to animate and draw things that way than it is to do it frame by frame. It also is able to replicate like the style of manga, or what we would call comic books, but I guess manga and comic books are like two different things. But it like also replicates that medium and its style in like the stillness of the images, as opposed to everything being like really in motion and, you know, constantly moving. I did want to quickly pause your ramble, Sailor, to ask Jacob if he knew about the fact that this was based on a 6-part manga series that ran for almost a decade and is a very truncated version of that, or if you sort of just like went in super blind as to what was going on in terms of like the background of this movie.
I went in pretty blind. I looked up a little bit about it. I think maybe in between halves, and saw that it was kind of based on a manga, but yeah, I didn't really get too much more out of it other than, okay, this is based on a manga. So, but I got the feeling, I mean, from watching watching the movie, that it was, you know, like plot is, very convoluted and kind of hard to keep up with. So it makes a lot of sense that it was kind of taken from a much bigger series.
Yeah, that's okay. I want to come back to that idea of the plot maybe being convoluted. But I feel like the other thing that we should mention before we move on is the fact that the writer and director of the movie is also the writer slash animator for the manga series, which I feel like is something that doesn't happen a lot in the translation of a text from the manga medium to the either TV or movie medium, where a lot of times, you know, the original writer creator will be like a part of the producing team, the writing team, you know, whatever it may be. But I hope I don't butcher his name, but Katsuhiro Omoto, who is the creator of the Akira manga, had like full creative control over the movie. And I feel like it not kind of, it like totally helps to have him be in total control, because he understood in a way that no one else would, like what needs to be in the movie version from the manga, and like what can be dropped out, what can be truncated, what can be like glossed over in order to retain the uh emotional thematic integrity of his original text. And Sailor, I'll kick it back to you for more rambling if you have thoughts on that.
It is. I can't speak to anime again. I'm not an anime aficionado. I know some anime manga creators, um, like the Dragon Ball Z man, the god who created Dragon Ball Z, who's just passed away. I know he was always involved in various adaptations of his work, but for the creator of a manga to say, "Hey, I'm going to direct this movie," it's a I don't know why they thought that would be a good idea, and God bless them, because it really works. But I think this was the only time they could have made it, because I don't know if they could have made it earlier, because I don't know if they had access to the excuse me, the quick action recorder that they had at that time, which was that allowed them to digitize frames and play them at 24 frames a second, which is why the animation is as close to real life than as close as you can get than rotoscoping, which has that uncanny valley effect. Rotoscoping, if you're unfamiliar with the term, is when you will film an actor and then take that film and then just animate on top of the action. Fire and Ice, the Ralph Bakshi movie, is rotoscope. If you need an example of rotoscoped, Heavy Metal is rotoscoped. Rango,
A Scanner
A
Darkly.
Scanner Darkly, thank you, is a perfect example of rotoscoping, where you're just filming actors and then you're just animating on top of that. And there's an Scanner Darkly is meant to look weird, but like when you watch Fire and Ice, you're like, why does it look so weird? Like the brain, it's a tricky beast, and Akira is fluid enough where you still recognize it as animation without you going, why does this look so weird? So they had that technology that they were able to digitize it at 24 frames a second, which I don't even think Disney had that technology at that time. So, I mean, this was the same year as Oliver and Company from Disney. So clearly, I don't know what the fuck Disney was doing, but it wasn't this. It sure as hell wasn't this. So, yeah, it's like, do you want to just jump into the story for people who haven't seen this, or because I feel like even though this is the Citizen Kane of animated movies, in my opinion, the grandfather of anime, it's not the first anime, but this is the one that broke the hardest.
Yeah. You know what? We may as well do a quick overview. Jacob, I'm going to go to you for that because Sailor, I'm afraid that you'll do a little too much if we go to you for this portion. So, Jacob, why don't you give us a quick overview of plot synopsis of what is happening in Akira?
Yeah, sure. And then Sailor can fill in the beats. So yeah, there's a high school bike gang that roams around a place called Neo Tokyo, like 30 years or something after it's been bombed by the Japanese government. And there's also a creepy old baby running around, and the bike gray gang runs into the creepy old baby, and then one of the bike gang gets kidnapped and experimented on and gets big powers. And then the main guy, the bike gang, Canada or Canada or whatever, goes out to find him while hitting on a girl who's a rebel. And then they kind of find him, but he gets his powers and he starts to use them and go a little bit out of control. And there's some bad military guys. However you want to clean that up, Sailor.
No, you did a fantastic job, and I do love the fact that Raph thought I was gonna ramble on this shit. It's hard not to ramble on this shit, but because we didn't even mention the Akira of it all, which I don't even know how to explain how he is involved in this shit. But there's another psychic that somehow possesses. We're just gonna keep calling him Canada. Possesses possesses Tetsuo. Yeah. I don't even know how the fuck that factors into the mix, but I will say the major difference between the movie and the manga is that in the manga, Tetsuo is a huge piece of shit. Like he is a much bigger monster in the manga, and thankfully the movie decided. I mean, he's still kind of a jerk ass.
That's
he's a bit of a jerk ass, but they made him more of a tragic character because he gets this power that he never wanted. He essentially becomes a god. He gets taken over by another god, the psychic Akira, and then turns into a giant biomechanical fetus, which isn't a spoiler if you haven't seen it, because again, a lot of this doesn't make sense, so it doesn't really matter that you know the specifics of things. But
well, and I have to say, you know, there's still little hints of that Tetsuo with his being a jerk ass, like when his girlfriend is getting raped and he's like don't touch the bike.
Yeah.
You know,
Here's more about the bike. Yeah.
It's a pretty
It's
jerk-ass
a
move.
jerk-ass move, yeah. It's a cool bike, though.
And I guess, I mean, you know, it's one of these things where the movie doesn't really prioritize like character depth per se, but they do kind of, you know, I guess maybe, you know, Tetsuo, again, watching this only one time, Tetsuo was always kind of like jealous, obviously, of that leadership of having that power, I guess, wanting Canada's bike and wanting to be kind of, you know, and I guess he stole the bike in that scene, right? So, you know, it's kind of there in his character a little bit, at least. They kind of have that in there, and
I would say he's
it's still very much a tragic.
Yeah, I
view.
would say he's more emotionally immature than he is. Because I'd say he's kind of a piece of shit, but in the books, he's just a straight up monster. He's like an immoral monster that has to be put down.
Yeah.
Sailor, I think in your write-up version for this movie on the Canon, you say that, you know, in the movie, because he doesn't go into full jerk-ass territory the way he does in the manga, he becomes a more like tragic figure, like fully tragic in kind of like a Shakespearean way, because he's really this like byproduct of all of these sort of awful circumstances happening to him. And yes, he does in a way become a monster because of that, but it's not because he is like a monstrous person on his own. Sort of similar to the way that we were talking about Carrie and that character in that movie. Like there is some overlap in these sort of like outside forces making these people become quote unquote monsters in, you know, how they then become perceived. But it's not because they have like monstrous qualities per se within them. It's just sort of they're forced into it.
It's the movie is more of the tragedy of the end of the friendship, because it has to be Canada. We're just going to keep calling him Canada. Canada has to kill his best friend. Like that's the ultimate end of the movie, is that he has to put down his best friend. So, like you said, Carrie, but another one which is kind of similar in plot, if you think about it, is First Blood, the Rambo movie, where Troutman, who trained him, which is, let's say, for all intents and purposes, Troutman is his best friend. His best friend has to put down this dog that he created. Now, Canada isn't responsible for Tetsuo going crazy, but he is the older brother, best friend type, where he's always looking out for him. Even when he is being at his most reprehensible, he's still like, this is my friend, I have to help him. And it becomes his tragedy. And I'm, like you said, a Shakespearean tragedy.
Yeah.
Which I guess I said. I wrote that damn thing like 3.5 years ago.
I shouldn't have given you credit. I should have just said that I came up with the Shakespearean thing on my own.
I would have believed you.
So like the whole like Tetsuo Kaneda sort of dynamic is, and like going back to us trying to sloppily give some sort of coherent plot synopsis for this movie. Not to say that you guys didn't do a good job, because you guys did explain it very well, but this movie is, I don't want to say that it's not plot focused or plot heavy, because the plot itself is obviously super important, but the plot and everything really just then becomes this like playground for Omoto to talk about and bring up and confront us with like so many different thematic elements that you could write like 1,000 different critical essays about this movie, and they would all be about different things, and especially depending on the time that you're writing it. Like, are you writing it in 1988 when the movie first comes out? Are you writing it in 2024? Are you writing it from an American perspective, a Japanese perspective, a South African perspective, a German perspective? You know, like this is one of those movies where it's so rich and layered, not only in like the animation style, but also in its thematic explorations, that the plot, yes, is important, but it then becomes a movie that is about so much more that you don't, yes, you are worried about the characters, but you're also worried about all these other things. But I do think that the male bond at the center of it, like the friendship, is the most interesting of all of the topics, even though it's not the most grand in its scale. Like there are some like really big, heavy things that are being considered in this movie. And I don't know if we want to get into all of them or if there were maybe like a few that stuck out to you guys in particular. Jacob, what did you like? Was there anything that stuck out to you on that front?
Well, what I love about this movie is that there's little side, let's say side quests in the movie, but there's little subplots and little character things. Like there's this cult that worships Akira, because we get glimpses and we hear hearings like murmurs of this Akira character and this weird religious thing that's always around, and they have their little taiko drums and they're waiting for the return of this thing, and it's just sprinkled throughout. Or there's it's goddamn, there's so many themes, because there's just a 2 minute scene where there's just at school, and the classroom is chaos, but that was a representation of both Western and Eastern pop culture at that time, because American movies in the 80s, like Class of 84, and the juvenile run amok movies of the 50s, were showing kids just out of control, and Japan loved that idea, and they adopted it, and they had their own version of that. So that's the one scene where the West meets the East, and looking at it now, it might look like their idea of what children would act, or teenagers rather, would act like in the future, where there's no laws anymore and the teachers are barely giving a shit, because they're like, whatever, I can't handle you assholes, just go to the principal. And instead of going to the principal, they just leave. They don't give a fuck. But that was kind of indicative of the delinquent youth of Japanese culture and American culture. Not necessarily in real life, but it was a heightened version of what was happening. And there's a lot of I mean, we didn't touch upon it, but when Tetsuo is in the facility with the little what did Jacob call them, the little old man babies, the wrinkle babies,
Yeah,
the wrinkle babies who are trying to teach
the old baby.
the old man babies, which, just Google it if you haven't seen the movie. They look like old little Mickey Roonies just walking around, blued faced Mickey Roonies, just wrinkled as fuck, and it doesn't make sense. It doesn't matter. Don't worry about it. But he's there, and then that's a whole another fucking subplot. And while that's happening, and then we cut to Canada, and he's just skirt chasing. He's trying to flirt with every woman around. So sometimes it is plot intensive, where everything that's happening to Tetsuo is moving the plot forward, but not everything that's happening to Canada is. And some of those scenes are my favorite scenes in the movie, where it's not always, oh, we got to go shoot down the Godzilla fetus monster. It's, let's hang out with these guys at this bar in the jukebox before everything goes wrong. And that's
let's get a peek into this world and like what it's like to live in Neo Tokyo in 2019 from the 1988.
I mean, a lot of that is in the manga, where it's just more room to breathe. Because, I mean, we're talking about the Tetsuo and Kaneda. There's a whole gang of them, the capsules, that you might have seen their jackets in the movie Kong Skull Island. John C. Reilly wears that jacket, which is a direct reference to this movie. You might have seen that bike slide, because we're going to talk about that bike. Because that damn bike, spoiler alert, Kane and I are writing a list of the 100 greatest pop culture vehicles. That bike is going to be high on the list. If I have my say, it's going to be in the top 5. That is an iconic ass bike.
It should be.
I want it number 1. I know. Batmobile is probably going to be number 1, but fuck that shit. This bike is so goddamn cool. Because honestly, if you had all the money in the world, all the resources, there's no Batmobile that's as cool as that bike. Neither the Burton version, the Adam West version, the Tumbler from the Nolan version, especially not the Matt Reeves version, which looked like just a Cadillac. What is it? It's none of them are as cool as that fucking bike. It's so even the stickers that are on the bike are iconic. That's how iconic.
The Citizen sticker is so cool.
Cool that bike, that red.
All right, we're here. Let's talk about the bike. Jacob, let's go back to you for this one. As a first-time viewer, what did you think of the bike? What did you think of the bike slide? Were you familiar with the world-famous Akira bike slide before seeing this movie?
So, yeah, I don't think I had realized the bike slide reference much. I don't know if I heard of the Akira bike slide until Nope. When Nope did it, someone was like, "Oh, there's the Akira bike slide." So I was like, "Okay, well, I guess that's based on Akira." Very cool shot in Nope. Obviously based on the very cool shot in Akira. But yeah, I mean, so I knew going in like that there was going to be the bike slide at some point. And then of course you start off with more of the bike chase, which I didn't know as much about, and that chase is just freaking awesome in general. And you see the bike for the first time, and it's got that kind of again, I've only seen it one time, so it's like, trying to remember, but it's got kind of like the kind of round wheel right on the front, which is just a really cool design. And it kind of reminded me. It's funny because I haven't watched much of this on HBO Max. It's a good show. It seems like it's a good show, but I haven't watched it. It's called Scavenger's Reign, but there's a very similar bike design. Obviously, probably inspired a bit from Akira. So I was like, oh yeah, this bike reminds me of that, and it's very cool. It just oozes cool. So like, and then you got the light trails, kind of almost Tron reminiscent, but and just the way that all those scenes are shot, and set up, with the big buildings looming, just make the bike that much cooler. And then of course when the bike slide happens, I was like, oh yep, there it is. Very, very cool. I don't know. I kind of expected it to be later in the movie, honestly. But I was like, yeah, well,
yeah, it's like within like the first 5 minutes, right?
Yeah, like that was really cool. Glad to know now, have the reference in its proper context. So that was pretty cool. Also, just to jump back just a minute, I thought it was really funny after that whole bike chase scene to just kind of cut to them just at school and like. You realize that this bike gang is basically like the guys from Grease,
Yeah.
Yeah, we ride around on bikes. We're so cool and get these girls. It's like so far detached. I love the fact you never actually see them like in school there. They're just kind of like walking off the school grounds. But it's just such a funny contrast to be like, these are just school students, but here they are in this crazy setup. But anyway, yeah, the bike is amazing.
The bike is so iconic that 2 different parts of the bike have been referenced, and because not only that bike slide, but the poster itself, the marketing of this movie is Tetsuo walking up to his fucking bike. That's all you need to know about how fucking badass this movie is, and that bike, that they sold this movie on the bike. And of everything in this movie, and there's a lot in this movie, because we keep talking about the old man babies, everything in this movie, they're like, no, the bike is what's going to get them hot. And they were right. That bike. It's the poster. Is the Batmobile on the poster in any of these fucking Batman movies? I rest my case. That's all I'm going to say. That's all I'm going to say.
I like that you're turning this episode into just building a case against Kane, who may or may not actually listen to this.
He absolutely will not, but I will press upon him that There was evidence. I've made my case.
Since I won't have a say on that list, I'd just like to quickly shout out Treasure Planet, Solar Surfer, which I've been obsessed with since I was a kid. So it doesn't beat the Akira bike, no problems.
I'm gonna fight for it. I'm gonna try. He has very weird rules for this damn thing. I want the cat bus from My Neighbor Totoro, but apparently that's not a vehicle. It's a goddamn cat bus. But whatever.
It's a bus. I mean, you mentioned rather My Neighbor Totoro, and I think that movie also came out in '88 along with Grave of the Fireflies, which I believe are both Studio Ghibli movies. And so those two, along with this movie, Sailor, what you were talking about before with the explosion of Japanese animated movies sort of coming to America and opening our eyes to the possibility of like what can be done within the medium that's not just singing princesses and talking animals or whatever. Like, I think it's hard now for people, especially in 2024, where in the US, like being a weeb is a totally cool and acceptable and like kind of sort of mainstream thing to be, where when this movie came out, like yeah, people had probably seen some Akira Kurosawa samurai movies or like genre samurai movies and things like that. People had seen Godzilla and whatever, but this really like opened up a whole new world of Japanese pop culture to Western audiences and like Americans in particular. And it's still, it's the reason why now, like, every third person that you meet in the States is a self-proclaimed weeb.
This was the year of the Japanese explosion. I didn't Google when Grave of the Fireflies came out, but I
think it was also 88.
Well, I know the year. I mean the day, because I wanted to know which one of these movies came out first.
Oh,
I believe Akira and My Neighbor Totoro dropped on the same day, January 1st, 1988. That's
huge day for weebs.
The birth of the weebs, January 1st, 1988. Drop that. And if Grave of the Fireflies didn't kill them all off, nothing was going to, because that's about as potent as a I don't like anime anymore movie as you can possibly get.
I have not seen Grave of the Fireflies yet, and I really need to.
Well, Jacob, do you want to live? Then don't watch it, because it's gonna make you want to jump off a cliff.
But yeah, Sailor, that's exactly why I haven't seen it yet. You hear that it'll completely wreck you, so I'm very interested, but I have not seen it yet for that reason.
I feel like, you know what, we shouldn't even ask the question, but it would be really interesting to know sort of what the climate was, like the political climate, the artistic sort of climate was in Japan in 1988 or within the 1980s that birthed something like this, because I feel like this comes from a very particular sort of like place and time for a particular society for like something like this to come from it. I just don't have the information or intelligence to speak to that. I don't know if either of you gentlemen do.
That's above my pay grade. I'm here to talk movies. I ain't talking politics.
But all movies exist within a context. And I think that if we knew the context of what was happening in Japan in, the mid 1980s, it would just be an interesting thing to talk about. But it's above all of our pay grades. Duke does not pay us nearly enough money for us to be able to do that kind of research and preparation for these episodes. So if you have a problem with our ignorance, please take it up with Duke. He needs to pay us better so that we can do the podcast.
I will say though, I just want to impress upon people. This was not the first anime movie, but this was ground zero for anime. Like My Neighbor Totoro is not Miyazaki's first movie. Clearly, he had a couple of movies before: Nausicaa, The Valley of the Wind, and Castle in the Sky. So he clearly was working before 1988. But so I don't want anybody to be like, oh, they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. I don't when it comes to the politics of Japan in 1980, whatever the hell, because I don't remember when the manga was written. So I think Atama was just inspired by Western pop culture. To be honest with you, there's probably more politics that he infused into it. Obviously, it's hard not to. When you're creating any piece of art, you're going to put in things that you're.
I think there was like an Olympics coming to Tokyo in 88 or 86 or something, and there was not a lot of unrest, but people like in Japan weren't sure if they were necessarily ready to have like an Olympics game come to them. But I feel like most countries that end up hosting the Olympics have similar sorts of questions about like, oh, do we really have the infrastructure to do this? But I also ask because obviously Japan as a country and a culture, and particularly as a movie making culture, has like this really interesting perspective that no other country has, where they're the only people who have ever had a nuclear bomb dropped on them. So like when they make movies about the fallout from, from such an, it's coming from a place that the rest of us like can't really tap into, whether that be Godzilla or something like Akira.
Opens with
yes, we can like love it and appreciate it. Yeah. Like you do that in America, in an American movie, and it's like, oh my God, that's crazy or whatever. And like, if you're doing that in a Japanese movie to Japanese audiences, people are going to be like, holy shit, we know what that feels like. So like, we're going to interpret this in a different way, which is just like, I feel like we don't talk about it nearly enough on this podcast, but like that's why part of why it's so important that we do have a number of international movies within the canon, because they do really help us tap into a experience that we otherwise wouldn't. So like between the three of us, we're three super American dudes living in 2024. Like we don't know what it was like to be Japanese in the 1980s, but we watch something like Akira and we're like, okay, maybe I have like a little bit more of an idea of what that was like than I did before I watched this movie.
Basically what he's saying is Oppenheimer is the prequel to every Japanese movie.
Oh my gosh.
Am I wrong? Like that.
Is it too soon to make that joke?
I mean, they just got in the theaters over there.
I think people have been making that joke about Oppenheimer and Godzilla minus one.
That's true.
All right. That's where we are. We're the show that does.
Well, I mean, you're not wrong
jokes.
though. It's Japan as a society, as a civilization, as a culture is living under the shadow of that atomic blast. Like it has shaped everything. If you look at Japan before then, it was a radically different culture than it is now. Like if you look at the ancestors of the past, looking at a vending machine that has used panties, they'd be like, "What? Where did we go wrong? What the fuck happened? We used to be ninjas and samurai. Why is everyone dressed like cat girls? What happened?" Like they're living under the shadow. I don't think that's a controversial statement. They changed as a culture.
No,
and it's because of us.
The panty vending machine thing might be controversial.
That exists. They made it.
The other part.
You're weird, Japan. I love you, but you're weird as shit.
I've never seen that.
Don't Google it. It exists. They love vending machines for some reason. They're all about vending machines. You can get a whole ass pizza in a vending machine.
I've seen the vending machines. I've used the vending machines. I've gotten coffee and snacks and other things from vending machines on the street. I have not seen any of these vending machines that you speak of during my travels in Japan. But, To each their own,
I'm
Sailor.
not saying I
To
like
each their
it,
own.
but me and my Doom bucket, on those lonely nights, maybe you walk down the right wrong alley in Japan, you'll find anything. That's all I'm saying. Wink, 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 wink. You know what I'm talking about, Jacob.
I have never been to Japan.
That's the best, like, I plead the fifth version of of entering that conversation. Just, I've never been to Japan. Easiest way out. All right, so back to this movie. Is there anything else that you guys want to talk about? I feel like there's so much else that we can get into. We spoke a little bit about the like cult nature around Akira, the character himself. We spoke about how this movie is really about male friendship and also sort of how puberty sucks. Again, very Carrie-esque in that regard. We didn't talk too much about the violence, which I think is also something that is interesting when it comes to Japanese animated movies versus like what American audiences were used to seeing up until 1988. Like violence in animated projects like wasn't something that we were used to, right? Unless either of you guys know
Well,
any more
Ninja
about
Scroll
that.
came out the year before this, and that is insanely violent, and that's far more violent than this. I mean, the most violent aspects of this movie, besides the attempted rape, probably when Tetsuo has like his intestines fall out of his body. Like it's not real, but he's like
Mm-hmm.
envisioning it. I mean, take a shot. That and the giant mechanical fetus Godzilla monster, but which isn't so much violent as it is Cronenbergian body horror. I mean, I guess when his arm like extends and turns into that globule mess of wires and nasty. But yeah, Ninja Scroll came out. I mean, before this, but I don't think it hit Western shores until after this. So yeah, this really was our primer for.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like you said, this came out the birth of the weed. This came out the same year as My Neighbor Totoro, and that is about as adorable and cuddly and safe as a movie can be. And then you have this, which children shouldn't see it. I'm gonna say that has titties. Like movies are in this. Like this, not not exactly for children, but yeah, this really primed us for what was to come, and I don't think we were ready.
Well, yeah, it's definitely like an outlier. I mean, clearly American animation wasn't embracing this kind of violence where it shows that on screen. Western wise, I just Googled just to double check, and Watership Down came out in '78, and that's British. So I mean, there was some of that kind of experimentation going on, I guess. But in America, where it was so dominated by Disney, I mean, there was violence technically, but it was always, bloodless kind of slay the dragon kind of thing. But
Mm-hmm.
I think this, it's kind of shocking, and also even other later things that came along like Princess Mononoke, that also has some violence in it, but it's still got kind of a whimsical setting in a sense. But like this being the cyberpunk setting that it is, kind of it just it leaves nowhere for that violence to go. It's not softened in any way, really. It's kind of grimy and edgy. It's not offset in any of that Miyazaki um,
Mm-hmm.
ambiance or whatever you would say. So like, I think this should show, although I don't know how much of an impact it's had on. We're kind of starting to see a little bit of. Uh, I'm trying to figure out the agreement. I guess American animation is testing the waters of doing more violence in animation. Obviously, you have like Invincible,
Mm-hmm.
but I mean, we didn't see. I don't think American audiences or American animation studios certainly didn't jump on making more adult oriented and violent films or anything.
I mean, I just think between like the violence and all the themes that we spoke about, it's so obvious that this isn't a kids movie, but because of how we've sort of come to understand animated movies in America over the last 100 years or so, like I'm sure that there are people who are like, "Oh, Akira, look at this animated movie. I'll buy this for my kids and like let them watch it, or like I'll rent this for my kids and let them watch it." And then, maybe the parent watches it with their kids and they're like, "Holy shit, I should have done a bit more research on this movie before showing it to my 8-year-old or whatever."
It's kind of frustrating to see how the American I don't know, studios or whatever kind of have embraced over the past couple decades now adult humor animation, like in shows, obviously. From the less crude Simpsons to now, like, I mean, shows like Archer that are, way further up in the adult humor, but they still have just strayed away from, drama and like adult violence drama. I mean, I would love for an animation studio that could actually make an adult, animated film that has like a Lord of the Rings type of flavor to it. But we're just kind of shackled in America. It's like we can't get past that. So hopefully things like Invincible can maybe start to grow that audience here. But I guess we'll have to just see, because I feel like too, like people in America, they can't get over this hump of seeing animated movies or TV shows as just for kids, no matter what the content is, and they should watch this and realize that it's not.
I'm actually going to
Yeah.
jump in real quick and say, well, I got some news for you, buddy, because you mentioned Lord of the Rings. We didn't mention him, but Ralph Bakshi, it predates this by a decade. But I don't think he fooled any adult into renting this for children, because you see the cover of Fritz the Cat where he's sitting on a chair and he's got his hand down a cat's dress playing with her titty. It's very X-rated. No adult accidentally rented that for their child. Maybe Heavy Traffic, maybe American Pop. Definitely not Coonskin, but Ralph Bakshi definitely predates Akira. So if we're going to throw anybody the mantle of the godfather of animation violence, I don't know if I would say it's Ralph Bakshi, but he definitely helped pioneer it, or at least made it accessible, or at least showed studios you can do this. You don't have to keep making the same old, like I said, princess talking animal movie. I mean, even though Fritz the Cat is talking animals, but you never seen these type of talking animals. So, but I agree, Jake. But I don't know, like video games, they still have that stigma of they're for children, and it's like that hasn't been the case for 40 years. Why the hell do we still believe this? I don't know. I don't get it.
It is also funny that like in the US, whether it be Sailor, like some of those older examples that you were giving, or Jacob, some of the newer examples that you were giving, that the other end of it is that we go to like the ultimate extreme where it's like super raunchy and like super adult, as opposed to something like this is just like a movie for adults that happens to be animated because that's the medium that is, best suited to tell the story. With all the other examples we're giving, it's like, because we're so used to animation being only for kids, that when it's for adults, it has to be like maximum for adults, not just a movie that adults go to see or a TV show that adults watch,
Yeah, absolutely. And like, that's the thing that becomes such a niche audience in itself, like, I mean, so many movies that are made today would look so great if they were animated. And shoot, I'm excited for Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes this weekend, and that's basically an animated movie. So it's
Yeah.
just very hyper realistic. I mean, like, I think that there would be a killer show if you made Planet of the Apes in like a kind of 2D-ish animated style, I mean, I'd watch the heck out of that.
Well, I'm going to jump off of what Raph said about this being a medium. I think that's the huge disconnect from Western studios or thought processes versus the Eastern, the Japanese, which is we still look at animation as a genre. Go back in your memory to Blockbuster or Hollywood Video. Look at the categories in your mind. They had Western, they had sci-fi, they had new releases, and they had animation. And in animation, they did not have movies like this. And they didn't want movies like this because that's where Disney movies were and that's where the kids' movies were. And since we've always treated it like a genre instead of a medium, because it's not a genre, animation clearly is not a genre. There's so many different forms in animation. There's 2D, there's 3D, there's stop motion, there's shadow puppets, there's so many different types of rotoscope, like I said, different stories you can tell. Japan doesn't have that problem. They see it as just another way to tell a story, and that's why they're able to have all of these elaborate animated movies that tell any type of story, whether it's a day in the life of a teenager or the day in the life of a teenager who also happens to be the son of the devil. And you're like, all right, whatever. Why the hell not? Like, they're not bound by anything other than their imagination. And that's so beautiful and so refreshing. And we don't have that here. We just don't. And I really wish we did.
No. And I mean, but this movie is the perfect example of that. Like, this is just the medium. It's just animation as medium because, in order to bring to life a cyberpunk Neo Tokyo, it works best when you animate it. And yeah, it could look cool live action, but it's not necessarily needed for the telling of the story. And with that, I think that it is now rumored, or the latest update is that he's no longer working on it. But like, Taika Waititi, stay the hell away from making a live action Akira movie. I think we can all agree on that.
I like Taika. I love Taika. I feel like it's cursed.
I don't trust this in his hands.
Anyone's hands, to be honest with you. It's cursed. He's not the first director that's crashed and burned up against this property. I don't know why it's so hard for people to try to adapt this fucking thing. But he's, I think, the 7th director in the last 15 years that Warner Brothers has had attached to it. I can run down the list. I'd have to Google it, but it's a long list. You can find it for yourselves out there. Yeah, this is one of the infamous never made movies, because I don't think it's ever going to happen, but not in the way they want it to. I think they should just make it a TV show, because then you can get all of it. You can get the entire model.
Yeah. How about this, Hollywood? Don't remake perfect movies. If you're going to remake something, take a movie that was shitty and then make it good. Don't take something that was really, really, really good and then make it less really good. Seems like a losing battle. What do you guys make of, because we haven't really talked about it too much, the grotesque, as Sailor has been calling it, fetus Godzilla monster that we see at the end? Jacob, what are your thoughts on that? Because that is like a really singular image and moment from this movie.
All power to it. It's cool. It's bizarre. It's great. It's great to see interesting animation, even if it's a bit out there.
When Americans adapt to kaijus and we want monsters, we do Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. When Japan does their own take on kaijus, which they themselves created, they're like, how about we just crank it up a notch? Let's get crazy. And it's funny that you mentioned Godzilla, because I'm like, Like Godzilla, that starts with an atomic blast and then it ends with a giant kaiju monster. Is this just a retelling of Godzilla? I asked this question to the floor.
You know what? I'll allow it.
Yeah, sure. Why not? The birth of Godzilla.
So instead of Godzilla -1, it's Godzilla plus a cool bike. That's what Akira is now from now on. Godzilla plus a cool bike.
That's its new title. That's fair. That's totally fair. I mean, but then, so like with what we were just talking about, that last scene can't be, I guess now it could be done in a live action version, but you imagine a 1988 version where this is live action and that body horror isn't, you're not able to do it in the same way with the same effectiveness that you are able to do it within this animated medium. And it's like, yeah, that's part of why this movie needs to be animated, so that we can get that monster at the end in the way that it needs to be presented to us.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things with the live action animation hybrid that we're doing now. I mean, like, because now what we call live action has so much animation in it, but it has to be realistic enough to match the world, which is the problem. And so it's like, to make something like that that's really grotesque and out there, it's like you have to do all this work in order to try and make it suit the world that it's in. But when you create the world in animation, it's more like seamless. You don't have to figure out, okay, how in the world are we going to adapt this into looking right with the lighting and the textures and all that? Just animate it. Just animate the whole thing.
Easy enough.
When we were talking about it, I know we don't want a live action remake, and I agree. But if Denis Villeneuve, after he's done with Dune, said, I'm going to do Akira because Taika's out, I wouldn't, because he somehow made Dune. I don't know how he did it, but he figured it out. If he could fucking, I trust a Denis Villeneuve to give me giant fetus Godzilla monster. Take a shot every time.
When you were talking about it before, I was kind of thinking Denis would be the one guy who I would maybe be a little bit interested if he was like, yeah, I want to make a live action Akira movie. I don't know why I'm whispering.
Listen, like, Denis Villeneuve could announce he's taking on a movie about the Got Milk campaign, and I'd watch it. Like,
so you got me again, Denis. Like, man doesn't miss.
Well, all right, Sailor, Jacob, I think we've covered most of what we need to cover with this movie. Obviously, if you guys have any other topics or anything that you want to bring up, we can. And if not, we can start to move over into recommendations.
Well, I just need to say really quickly that it feels really wrong not having Duke here, considering how many times we've said Canada.
How long have you been waiting for that joke?
It just popped up in my head,
I'm sorry, but that
Jacob, we got a boo.
that needed a boo.
At least give him a golf clap. I'm golf clapping.
I'm sorry.
That was a good joke, Jacob.
Thank you.
And that wasn't a pity clap either.
I'm sorry, Jacob.
No, it's okay.
I'm glad Duke isn't here though. He sucks.
You're not.
I got your ass, Duke.
I had to slip something in, Raph. You're not getting tranked today.
So we'll settle for a Duke Canada joke. Okay, you know what? I'll allow it. Thank you. Sailor, did you have, or Jacob, did you have any other last thoughts, or is that how you're going to close out?
This is how we close them. That's it. The Canada joke. I don't even care if Jacob has more to say.
Sailor, did you have anything else?
I said my piece. I rambled a bunch. I don't want to get that ramble on button again. I know you're hovering. That hand is hovering.
Let's get into recommendations. It's hovering. It's always hovering. It's always hovering over that ramble on, just in case. You never know. It's our favorite sound piece. All right, dudes. Let's do some recommendations for Akira. I'm sure that this will be a very fun round of recommendations, just in case we have any new folks out there, any new listeners. So what we do is, for each movie that we introduce into the canon, we also recommend 3 things to check out if you like said movie. At least one of those 3 things has to be another movie The other two things, however, can be any and everything else. It can be more movies. It can be a book. It could be an album, a band, a what else? Help me, guys. A restaurant. We like to get really creative and, really not weird, but we like to, get a little out there. The connections can be as on the nose or as loose as we like. We just, they do need to be tied back to the movie of the week. So it needs to be tied to Akira in some way. And for any movies that we recommend, no movies that are already in the canon. So we've mentioned Blade Runner, we've mentioned Carrie. We can't recommend those movies because they are already in our canon. So with all that being said, let's go around the room. I'm going to go with Jacob first, and then Sailor, and then Raph, and just give a brief explanation for why you're recommending what it is that you're recommending. So Jacob, whenever you are ready.
Cool. I'm going to go first and not get my first recommendation stolen this week. Not that I don't think there'll be any overlap anyway on this one, but anyway,
I'd be surprised if it was.
My first recommendation is going to be Undone on Amazon Prime Video. Have y'all either of you seen Undone?
Bob Odenkirk animated show?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. That's right. So it's cool that we already talked a little bit about rotoscope animation because this is a rotoscope animated series. It's a very short series. There's 2 seasons. Stars Bob Odenkirk in there alongside I can't remember the lead actress's name. I think she was in Alita Battle Angel. Her name escapes me. Anyway, really cool sci-fi time travel type concept, and just thought of that here. It's a very loose connection because it's sci-fi and it's animated, but the animation is very cool. And with Akira being animated on the ones and having that intricacy, it kind of does have a bit of a feel of the rotoscope animation, which just looks really cool, really trippy visuals that, as an animation lover, I think you would appreciate Akira and Undone in a similar fashion.
Sweet. I like that. That's a dope pick.
Before I get to my pick, the actress's name is Rosa Salazar. Just throwing that out there.
Thank you.
She's fantastic. My first one is an animated anime movie. Most of mine are, because I pick them while we're doing the episode. Because I'm a wild man. I like to play it loose. Night on the Galactic Railroad from 1985. It is about 2 anthropomorphic cats. I think everyone in this movie is an anthropomorphic cat. And there's one pink one, one blue one. They're both boys. And late one night, they decide to jump on this train. And one of the boys is wondering, what's up with this galactic railroad? Where is it going? What's its purpose? And the other one seems to be content with the train, and he's not asking as many questions. And the other one is wondering why. It's kind of like Polar Express if Polar Express was good. But I don't want to get too much into what it's about, but let's just say it is a kids movie, but it has some heady themes that I don't think kids movies have anymore. So, Night on the Galactic Railroad, 2 cats on a fun adventure on a intergalactic train.
Sweet. That sounds very.
I swear to God, it's better than my plot
synopsis.
It's just I'm
no.
Some details on the table.
We trust you.
Yeah,
we trust you.
Sounds pretty cool.
I like it. Okay, cool. I think for my first pick, I'm going to go with a kind of silly one, and I'm going to do an episode of TV that does a direct rip-off, homage, whatever you want to call it, to Akira, and it's not the bike slide, because most references to Akira end up being the bike slide. But what I'm going to recommend is an episode of TV that ends with one of our main characters becoming the fetus Godzilla kaiju monster that Sailor referred to Tetsuo's final form as. The TV show that I'm talking about is South Park. The episode is Cartman, or the character is Cartman, and the episode is Trapper Keeper. Season 4, episode 12. That has a lot of references to Terminator, and also ends with a direct reference to Akira in a very funny way.
I love when you think outside the box, Raph. Beautiful.
I feel like that's very within the box. It's just a direct reference to the movie. Therefore, outside the box. Sweet. Jacob, what's your second recommendation?
For my second recommendation, I'm just going to recommend the Legend of Korra series, the sequel series to Avatar: The Last Airbender. Not as good as Avatar: The Last Airbender, primarily due to some structural issues with the network at the time. But really, it's a little bit more mature from the get go than Last Airbender, and it's a little bit more of a cyberpunk setting. I think it's one of the closest things we've had in of a more mainstream animated series that leans into like an action drama. That, I mean, of course, it has some humor in it, but we haven't seen a lot of that. I mean, Invincible now is closer probably to Akira than Korra was, because I mean, obviously, Invincible now on Amazon, not having the network kind of constraints, is embracing the violence a lot more. But but in terms of drama and action, I think The Legend of Korra really stands up, and hopefully some more shows like that come out at some point. So that's my second pick.
Nice. I've heard good things. Obviously, Last Airbender is like one of the best shows of the 21st century. Super random that it's just like a kid show from Nickelodeon, but is amazing. So, and I've heard that Legend of Korra is pretty sick as well. So, dope pick. I like it.
For my second recommendation, I am also picking. All of my shit's gonna be anime. Just heads up, just letting you know. Boring. Sailor's boring. Boo. I know. 2009. I'm going with Redline, which should be in the canon because it's badass. Imagine Mad Max Fury Road, but animated and somehow more action packed than that. And that's Redline.
I like it.
It's a race that happens every 5 years. It's an intergalactic race. It's kind of like F-Zero, the video game series, if you're familiar with that, where all these aliens come together to race. And he competes and he wants to win. He has to fight the mob. He has to fight love. Many obstacles get in his way, and there's a lot of driving. And it's, when I say one of the most beautifully animated movies ever made, I'm not speaking hyperbole. I don't know how they animated this damn thing, because it's not 3D. It's hand drawn. And when you watch the detail of this shit, you're like, how the absolute shit did they do this? And how did I not know about this beforehand? This is your fate. If you went back in time and you showed this to your 12-year-old self, I don't know where your life would be now, because you would just be in a coma watching this forever. Your eyes would burn out of its socket. You would grow a third testicle. That's how testosterone filled and bad A's Redline is. You gotta say it like that. Bad A's Redline 2009.
Awesome. Can't wait to check it out. I will let you know how my third testicle is doing after I watch it.
Get it checked, because it's probably cancerous. It's no good. Get rid of it.
Oh dear. Okay. I'm gonna pick a movie for my second recommendation. Another anime movie, and I think this director understood the expansiveness of the possibilities of animated movies in a way that no director before or since has. The director is Satoshi Kon. He has two extremely famous movies that you've probably heard of and hopefully have seen, but I think the better of the two is Perfect Blue. an insane movie about identity and personality. It's sort of like if Persona were like an animated trip. It's one of the most amazing movie experiences that you'll have. It's a shame it's on the Canon, but I also understand why. But it is one of the most amazing movies you'll ever see. Perfect Blue by Satoshi Kon. R.I.P.
Fucking
Died way
rest
too
in
young.
peace,
And
King. Rest in power.
could still an absolute king. Rest in power. Yeah, could still be giving us bangers today. His other most famous movie, which I don't know if it'll come up in recommendations, but Christopher Nolan essentially ripped off the entire thing for Inception. So if you like that movie, check out the Satoshi Kon guy, because he is an absolute legend and deserves like all of the love and
here's
praise
the
in the
thing.
world.
I don't want to ramble on, but then you say shit like that, Raph, and then the influences between Paprika, or the similarities between Paprika and Inception, are so fucking minute, and I'm so tired of people. God damn it, they're so fucking minute, and yet people are like, "Oh, he ripped them off." They are so radically fucking different movies.
I just want to take any opportunity I can to dunk on
damn you.
Christopher Nolan.
But I agree. I think Perfect Blue is one of the most important anime movies, because I remember video game magazines in the back would they would have like Final Fantasy VII figurines, or what Gundam figurines, or whatever the hell they were hawking, and they would always have like anime, and that was one of the big ones they were always trying to push, was Perfect Blue. So I think this is in the top 5 of anime that really had an impact on Western civilization. It's such a good fucking movie. And I almost picked
amazing.
Paprika, so I'm glad that I didn't, because now we get to talk about it in the streets when we're fighting.
Yeah, I can't wait for it. All right, Jacob, before Sailor jumps through his computer screen and strangles me, what's your third recommendation?
Well, I had a couple options lined up, but when we were talking about the core kind of Akira being about Canada having, ultimately to deal with, he has to kill his best friend who's been overtaken by this completely different element, and there's no saving him, and he just has to do what he has to do. It made me think of a true American classic. I doubt it's in our canon. I'm pretty sure it's not. So I think it's safe to say I recommend Old Yeller.
I knew that the way that you were setting it up, it was going to be an amazing punchline, but I was not expecting Old
Chronicle,
Yeller.
of all things. I was not expecting fucking Old Yeller. Oh, god damn it, Jacob. Good job. Well played.
I mean, how much more gut wrenching can you get than having to kill your best friend? And for real, the through line is there. In Akira, he's Tetsuo is being possessed by some crazy godlike power person that turns him into a fetus Godzilla monster, and for Old Yeller, it's rabies. So
essentially the same thing.
Now I want a mashup of Old Yellow. God damn it, Old Yeller and Akira, where Old Yeller turns into a fucking fetus Godzilla monster. He's like, no, Old Yeller, no. He just puts the guns to dogs.
Well, I'm sure Disney is looking at a remake of Old Yeller, so maybe that can get pitched to them as a change up.
If you're listening, Iger,
this is your
Sailor's
chance,
got ideas.
Taika. Redeem yourself. You want to make Akira? Do it this way. Blow everyone's fucking minds.
Yeah.
They're like, oh shit, Taika's insane. We love him again.
Awesome. Jacob, that was legendary. That was awesome.
I loved it.
Sailor, how do you follow that up?
You kind of took the wind out of my sails with that one. Well, because nothing I can recommend is going to be as good as that. I'm actually going to recommend another movie from the same director, Osamu, But I'm not going to do one of his feature films because he's kind of a one-hit wonder. Steam Boy's not that good. I mean, that might be a controversial hot take, but I'm not the biggest fan of Steam Boy. But I am a fan of his work on various different animated anthology series. Short Piece, Memories, and especially Robot Carnival, which I distinctly remember seeing on the Sci-Fi Channel way back in the day, back when the Sci-Fi Channel played anime movies. That's how long ago we're talking, because they sure as fuck don't do that shit anymore. And I just remember this sequence of this robot walking across the desert, and it stuck with me forever. And I was like, "What the fuck is that? What was this thing?" And I just assumed that it was kind of like an interstitial between commercials or something, kind of like how Nickelodeon used to do that, Cartoon Network. And I just assumed that it had like nothing to do with anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so one day, like 10, 12, 15 years ago, whenever the hell it was, I was watching Robot Carnival, and it's a segment in that movie, and my mind exploded, and I was very happy that I finally unlocked that memory. It's just an anthology where every single story is about a robot to some degree or another. I think it's fantastic. Memories is probably his better anthology movie because it's just 3. Robots is a lot more. Some of them vary in quality, some of them vary in length. But I think it's a fascinating movie that's not talked about anymore. And I love me an anthology. Sailor loves an anthology. And there's definitely none in the canon as far as I know. So Robot Carnival. It's not Old Yeller.
Sweet. But
Still great.
But it's still great. Still a great pick. I love it. That's sweet. I had not heard of that, so another one to add to the watch list. All right, cool. So I'm surprised that none of us went with the. You know what? I'll do my recommendation first, and then we'll talk about that. I'm going to recommend a museum, and I mentioned before that I have been lucky enough to be able to travel to Japan in the past. And while I was there, I was in Kyoto, and Kyoto has an amazing museum all about manga that you can check out and learn about the history of it, the different styles of it, its importance within Japanese culture, how it then translated into anime movies, anime TV shows, and all that stuff. And all through today, different animation styles and all that good stuff. So if anyone out there is ever able to get out to Japan, to get to Kyoto, you have to check out the manga museum. It is amazing. I bought a few issues of Dragon Ball there. It's how I got into Dragon Ball. Within the last 5 years, I read it. And Sailor, similar to you with the Akira manga, I was able to. It's printed in the same way that Japanese manga are written, because Japanese folks read right to left as opposed to our left to right. So the book is backwards from our perspective, but still in English. But super cool, really cool experience if you're ever able to get out to Japan. The manga museum in Kyoto.
Very nice.
All right.
Is that the most expensive recommendation that's ever been made?
Yeah, just hop on a $1,500 flight to Japan. Take a $150 train ride from Tokyo to Kyoto, and then spend about $40 at the museum. So it might be the most expensive recommendation we've had. Yeah,
it's cool.
But I'm just saying, if anyone ever finds themselves out in Kyoto, this is one of the things that you have to check out. Gentlemen, before we say our final goodbyes, let's run through our recommendations one last time. Boom, boom, boom.
Was there
same
another
order
recommendation or something you said you wanted to mention?
Oh, I was just going to mention that I'm surprised that none of us brought up Stranger Things. Freaky little kids with numbers printed on them, who do like psychic
I
power
was also
shit. But I'm
I was
also
also
happy
going
that we
to
didn't.
just another shout out to Scavenger's Reign. I thought Jacob might have recommended it, so I didn't want to step on his recommendation. But if you haven't checked it out, it's on HBO Max. Scavenger Reign. I think it's 9 episodes. It's fantastic. Check it out.
I won't penalize you for
Jacob
doing
Jacob
a
brought it up
bonus
first. I'm just
recommendation.
saying.
I did. I haven't finished watching it, but I watched the first 2 episodes, I think, and I mean it's really cool, and I don't know why I haven't finished it. But yeah, it does seem it's a good rec for this, but
So blame Jacob. That's all.
So I won't penalize either of you. There will be no suspensions from
You just
future
recommended
episodes.
a $2,000 thing that we will never see in our lifetime because we write for a website for free. We ain't seeing that shit. We gonna die poor, Raph.
Dude, you never know. You might someday be in Kyoto and end up at this museum.
Yeah, when I find that sugar mama.
Yeah, exactly.
I will happily take a selfie in front of the Akira bike or whatever the hell's over there in that museum. If they don't have the bike, Raph, I swear to God, I'm gonna come to New York and I'm gonna punch you in the mouth.
That's fair. You can do that. All right, let's run through our recommendations one last time before we say goodbye. So, Jacob, once again, what are your 3 recommendations?
Yeah, I got Undone on Amazon Prime Video, the Legend of Korra series, and Old Yeller.
I have Robot Carnival, Red Line, and Night on the Galactic Railroad.
Amazing. I've got South Park, Trapper Keeper episode, season 4, episode 12, Perfect Blue from Satoshi Kon, and the most expensive recommendation that anyone has ever done on the show, and perhaps an asshole move by me to recommend the Manga Museum in Kyoto. Sailor, Jacob, this has been a ton of fun. Very insightful, very colorful conversation. Pun intended on the colorful. But thank you guys so much for joining.
Boo yourself. Boo it.
I deserve that.
And I hope that hockey game we're watching went well. No hockey pads. I was setting you up for the sound bite, my guy.
Oh, nope, damn it.
Right now, boo yourself again. Do it again. Do it again.
It's too late. It's too late. Yeah.
There it is. I was trying. I know you love that hockey pad.
Yeah. I deserved it. Well, guys, thank you again for joining, Sailor. I'm happy that we got to get you on to talk about one of your favorite movies, because I feel like you rarely get that opportunity on the show. And Jacob, thank you for being such a good sport and agreeing to talk about a movie that you hadn't seen until very recently. I think it worked out well for all of us.
Yeah, because I don't think any of my other favorite movies are in the canon. I don't think Killer Clowns from Outer Space is
and the ones that are
to the canon, so I will never talk to you guys again. This is the
Killer Clowns.
Yeah, the greatest movie of all time, Jacob. Yeah.
I still haven't somehow seen it all the way through, but I could get on board Killer Clowns being in the canon. I like what I've seen of it. I like the tone.
I don't want you to see it now. I want you to just give me your impressions of, like, I like what I saw. It was good enough for me. Canon worthy. I like the stills. I like them clowns.
Listen, I mean, I love the campiness. I like the style. Wherever it goes from there, I'm sure it's good. So.
It's a man of taste. Jacob knows what he likes.
Well, before we actually get out of here, because I feel like we're coming up on time, do either of you have anything coming up on the website to preview? Anything that folks should be on the lookout for?
Yeah, I don't have much. I should be doing some reviews. I'm finally getting got a little busy, and Raph stole my Civil War review, which is fine, which is great, because I'm glad Raph could step in and do that, because I've been really, really busy. between work and home life, but that's coming to an end. So yeah, I saw The Fall Guy. Need to probably review that, and really stoked to see Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes this weekend, and definitely want to be reviewing that. So that's really all I got right now that I can think of.
Sweet. Looking forward to that. I know you've been super pumped for Kingdom of Plapes. We even spoke about it on our Plapes episode a few weeks back. So looking forward to your review of that. And I'm sorry that I stole your thunder on Civil War, but I couldn't. I started writing a letterboxd review, and I wasn't able to keep it to like a respectable length for that. And I was like, I just need to write a full review for the website.
I mean, if you guys have
because
a different
I have too many
opinion,
thoughts.
I mean, I have no problem with there being multiple reviews of the same movie on the site. I don't know why that's. I don't think that is that a rule.
Yeah,
Dueling reviews, like a dueling piano bar, but
I wouldn't,
movie
if
reviews.
it was kind of posed that way, but I would, my review of Civil War is a lot different take than Raph's for sure. Like I like the movie overall. I totally see Raph's point of view though on it. I think it's one of those movies I'm definitely going to have to watch again. But I did like some of the elements of uh of how it depicted certain things about journalism. But yeah, not to get
Yeah,
into that.
I would
But
I would love to read your thoughts on that.
yeah, absolutely. So it's mostly written, so maybe it'll go. But anyway, what's
Yeah,
Sailor have?
yeah,
I
Sailor.
don't
What
know
do you
when it's
have?
going to drop because I don't know how far along he is in it. Because Kane's really taking the reins on it. I'm helping him here and there. But again, the vehicle list. And then the next list I think I'm going to do is the 100 greatest television theme songs. And then I'm currently, I can't promise that this is going to drop anytime soon, but I am currently working on 1,000 greatest movies of all time. So look out for that. I don't know when the hell that's going to drop because it's going to take some time to do the write up.
I'm sorry. Did you say the 1,000
I sure
greatest
did.
movies of all
I
time?
sure did, Ref. The 1,000 greatest movies.
Interesting.
It took me 9.
And that's going to be different from our canon because this isn't a list of the most
No,
essential
it's
movies. It's just the
because there's shit
greatest.
in the canon that should not.
Those are two different
there's,
things.
Yeah, there's shit in the canon that's not on my list at all. But 1,000.
There's stuff in the canon that are essential, but they're not great.
Yeah, and we've done an episode on that movie. It ain't in the canon. It ain't on my list. I'll let the listener decipher what the hell I'm talking about.
Yeah, go back and listen to all of our past episodes and see if you can figure out which movie it is that Sailor is referring to.
It's just
a
me
fun
and
little game
Sid.
called
Yes,
Listen
it's
to all
just
of our
me and Raph.
episodes.
Figure it out. Which one is it? That's not making my list. 1,000 sounds like a lot of movies. It is, but it really isn't. So I'm at the editing phase of trying to whittle it down because, yeah, I started with every movie that was
Amazing.
ever in every edition of the 1,001 Movies You Need to See Before You Die book. That took me to like 2,000 or so. Cut out half of those immediately because I'm like, what the fuck is it? How did two versions of Jungle Book make? How did both versions of Jungle Book make the fucking cut? Okay, whatever. Jungle Book's not even in the top 10 Disney movies, but all right, whatever. So I'm also limiting it to 5 movies per director, which is also not as easy as it fucking sounds, especially directors like Christopher Nolan who have impeccable filmographies, Raph. Impeccable.
Yeah. I mean, Christopher Nolan's entire filmography is in the canon. So,
really is. It really is.
Yeah. Totally different set of criteria, rules for entry, but that'll be exciting to read. I'm sure everyone's looking forward to it. I know.
And I'm going to try to do it myself. I'm not going to have any contributors because I want people to come in fresh. It took me 9 months to do my 500 video game list, so this is going to be a little bit easier because I have write-ups already.
Look, that sounds like a Sailor project. I'm sure if you invite others into doing it, there will be discussions about the merits of certain movies that are in or are not in the list. So that sounds like a great project for you and for you alone. So I'm looking forward to it. That'll be a lot of fun. I was gonna say I don't think that I have anything of note coming up. Like Jacob, trying to write some reviews when I can, and other than that, we have our season 3 finale of the Canon coming next week. We'll be talking about The Princess Bride, which will be super exciting. We're gonna have a great crew on for that, and then we're gonna be taking a few weeks off for the summer. There might be a couple of bonus episodes that come out during the break. But as of now, the plan is Princess Bride next week, season finale, and then we'll be back in, I want to say, early to mid-July for season 4, which should be a ton of fun. And again, we might have some bonus episodes coming in between the 2 seasons. So a lot of fun stuff happening. Obviously, check us out on the website. Ton of great stuff over there. And we'll see you next week for Princess Bride. And in the meantime, we'll see you in the wasteland.